Knicks fans, welcome to the X's and O's Knicks Film School live show / podcast. Pleasure to be here with you. This is our first one of the season, and we can't wait to dig in. I am here, of course, with the great detail junkie, the defender of Julius, which will be put to the test tomorrow.
It will.
DJ won't it? How will you defend Julius?
I mean, it depends. Let's watch and see what happens. I might have to.
Who will defend Julius? Maybe we'll get into that.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so we're here to break that. Look, we're in this weird Knicks vacation in the middle of the season here. We've gotten a lot of time to digest, to go back to some film, to assess what's gone on so far this season. As a general check-in, here the Knicks sit at 16-10. The numbers are third in offense for cleaning the glass, 16th in defense, the fifth best net rating for cleaning the glass over the last 2 weeks, sixth in point differential, eighth in offense, seventh in defense. A lot of numbers trending the right direction. And yet, as you and I both well know, being on Twitter as much as we unfortunately are, a lot of unrest in the fan base. So this is an opportunity for all of you to ask us questions and see where we're at and what we're thinking. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. As we dive into the next, whatever it is, most of the season still to go, right? There's a lot of basketball left to be played. But I want to start before we get into the questions with my own kind of question to set the table. And what I want to ask you, DJ, is what has been most surprising thus far to you in this Knicks season? Both in a positive sense, what has surprised you in a positive sense, and then one thing that has surprised you in the negative sense that you thought was going to happen and hasn't happened, or didn't think was going to happen in a bad way, but has come to fruition. Give me those two things.
Well, I think this might surprise you a little bit in terms of the positive. I thought that Jalen and Kat would need a little more time to gel. And I was actually thinking about that play in the preseason. I think you might have posted it. A few people did, where Jalen sort of like, he starts to penetrate, picks up his dribble, Cat pops, and he's just a little late getting into him. And we all kind of had the same sense, like, all right, it's going to take some time for these two to sort of work these kinks out. I mean, Giannis and Dame are still trying to work things out, and they've been together for over a year. And it's just been seamless. And they've been the best pick and roll duo in the league. And I thought it would be great. I thought it would take 20, 25 games for them to get to this level. And it basically took a preseason for them to figure out where they want the ball, how to play off each other. They've been so synergistic together on offense, exceeding my expectations in terms of doing it this early with such limited games and minutes played together. So it's not about the level they've gotten to. I'm surprised that it took them this short a time to get there. So in terms of the positive, like I don't think that's been given enough credence in terms of like how impressive those two have been together and how little time they've actually played. They didn't have a preseason, a training camp, had a preseason, and right from the start of the season, minus a few hiccups here or there, they've been elite in terms of a two-man duo. And then I think this. Good. You want to respond to that one?
Obviously the numbers supporting that. For those who aren't aware, it's the best pick and roll duo by the numbers in basketball right now. It has been pretty consistently throughout the year. That stat continues to be updated and continues to be the case that they are the most powerful pick and roll / whatever pick and pop, pick and roll duo in the league. It is pretty incredible that it took 16 games for them or whatever. Now it's 26 games, but it was the case with 16 games. It's the case now with 26 games that they're the best in the league. Love it. Okay. And a negative one?
Well, and the negative one might be an obvious one. It's just, and I think he's been better of late. Mikal Bridges' defense, I just assumed, like many others, that the player that was around in Phoenix as a tertiary offensive player and their number one point of attack defender was just going to seamlessly fit back into that role and be that guy the Knicks have missed since they traded Quentin Grimes. And it's been, like I said, better of late, but I don't think it's fair to call it a positive right now. I think he's been a slight negative guarding the ball. I think he's been pretty good off the ball when he's had those opportunities, but guarding the ball, I don't think he's been good this year. They need him to be good. And I didn't anticipate this level of poor play, frankly, from him. You've talked about the lack of physicality. I think there's been some regression in terms of quickness, athleticism, flexibility to get maneuver around screens. Now, I don't know how much it is about working with Cat and playing with a guy that is going to be and drop more, and maybe there's a little bit of a opportunity for him to figure out that chemistry, but I just don't think he's been great on that end, and I think the Knicks need him to be. So that's been a bit of a surprise. And then beyond that, I think on the negative side, there hasn't been a ton. If they can clean that part up, I think this team can go really far. So on the negative side, I think that's been the one that's just really been kind of confounding. I don't really have an answer for it. And it's been one of those things I just didn't anticipate coming into the year.
Yeah, one thing I didn't consider, and as you were talking just now, I was thinking about it, is in Phoenix, we know he played on the ball, and generally they played an over the top and a drop scheme, right? So he's chasing over, Ayton's in a drop. They were a very fundamental defense under Monty in Phoenix. Like it was clean. Their rotations were clean. It was a very solid defensive group. And then he went to Brooklyn, and not only did the responsibility change offensively, which is certainly the case, that's a switch-heavy defense for the last 2 years. With Claxton at center, we know that team loves to switch. And so you wonder if not only, and I know you've mentioned that there might have been an athleticism, flexibility, regression. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that, but you may be right. But I do wonder, mentality-wise, like the damage that's done in 2 years where you're just not consistently putting out that effort to get over the top of a screen, which is only getting harder in the NBA, by the way, as teams get more intelligent about their screening seemingly every year and how they flip them, how they angle them. And I just wonder if he kind of lost that and maybe is slowly starting to regain it. But
that's a good point. And he has been really good when he's had chances to guard in isolation. He was great in Brooklyn, guarding the ball just one-on-one. And there's been this allowance of more physicality in the league. And I think for a lot of guys guarding the ball, that's been a benefit to them. I think OG Anunoby's seeing that. He just is one of those defenders that's not going to extract a lot of value out of that allowance because it's just not the way he's going to play anyway. But I think to your point, maybe there is some sort of like need to get back into that role and just to be able to move the body in the way that's necessary to navigate screens in the way that is being asked of him that he just hasn't had to do in a couple of years. And it's a fair point to wonder if he just needs more reps, more possessions, and it'll slowly start. Maybe he doesn't get to that point where he was in Phoenix, but if he's 90%, 80% of that, he's still the best on the Knicks at guarding the ball and would represent a huge upgrade of where he is currently. So I think that's a positive way of looking at it. Not a point I necessarily gave a lot of thought to, but I think I think you could buy that. I think it's fair.
Yeah, I'm going to give two positive surprises because you took my negative one. And I do think it's really the only negative one. And I'm going to give them quick. Number one, did not see the Knicks being top 10 in assists. I understood that there would be a lot more space. And I think in my head, translated that more into more driving lanes for Brunson. What I didn't necessarily think about is just the increased ball movement. And I don't think it's just because of the space. I think Cat as a hub at times when they utilize him that way is such a quick decision maker.
Yep.
And I think it's just, the comparison to Randall, and we'll watch it tomorrow night, like in terms of how long they hold the ball for, is just a dramatic change. And the amount of cutting space that has been created. I think that's what I really mean to say is like, I always envisioned the driving space. I didn't envision the cutting space. And the Knicks have done such a good job of taking the space that Cat creates and the way that Bridges cuts and the way that OG cuts. They're just getting Hart, certainly. They're getting a lot of really good offense from cutting without the ball into the paint that's now open because of Cat. That's one positive surprise. They're ninth in, I think they're ninth. Yeah, they're ninth in the league in assists per game right now. They're actually higher for a while. That's a really good sign. I just like the ball movement generally. And then the second one I would say is the bench, I think has been a pleasant surprise. Now, the backup center role right now is a bit in flux because Precious came back. Sims is now in the doghouse, although he had a nice stretch there where he was really solid as the backup big. But I'm talking specifically about Campaign and Deuce McBride. Deuce maybe shouldn't have surprised me with how consistently good he is, because he was for a large portion of last season. But the fact that he just continues to be this level shot maker, like, is stunning to me, and it's awesome to watch. And I think his leap on the ball defensively, because I think that part of his game was overrated over the first couple of years of his career, because I think he profiled as this really physical, tough guard, and he showed it in spurts. But I actually think he got beat more often than perhaps he was given credit for. This year, I think it's a different guy defensively. He's been excellent on the ball. He's been their best defender on the ball, frankly, by a pretty wide margin, I'd say. And then what Cam Payne has given this team is surprising to me. That is surprising to me. And hand up, I was someone who was like, man, Kolek might replace this guy by January. That's not the case, because Cam Payne is giving them more than anyone could have imagined in terms of energy, defense off the bench, and then also just making shots. I know he's gone a little cold of late, but he's been excellent for them. So the bench being more of a positive. I know they're still thin, like there's still a guy short, and the minutes are still too high for the starters. But to have those two guys coming off and consistently be a really positive add to this team has been a really nice surprise this year.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And just really quick on the cutting aspect of it in terms of Cat's passing, OG compared to last year, and Josh Hart have both increased not only their efficiency but their cuts per game. So the volume's up. Combine that with now they're making more shots. And then Mikal Bridges has been one of the more effective cutters in terms of effective field goal percentage. So we have those three guys playing off Cat. It's massive. And RJ had an interesting quote. I don't know if you saw it a week or so, maybe a week ago.
I was literally about to say this. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So basically the point is, like, it's hard to cut all the time when you don't get the ball. And I was a defender of Julius in terms of his passing. And I thought he, as a driver, I think he's an excellent passer out of the post. Very good. He is just not a great standstill sort of maneuver, hit with his eyes, see the whole floor and just find cutters all over the place. He's just not the type of passer he is. Cat has shown that ability at 7 feet to pass with both hands, one hand, left hand, right hand. And very versatile. Yeah.
The way he can almost Jokic like hold that ball out on different angles. Yep. And I know, the behind the head stuff gets a little carried away sometimes, but just in general, like the angles that creates, it's like it's an underrated thing, right? Like Jokic obviously can do it. The way he can wave that ball around and just fling it at any angle. Is really valuable.
Was it you? Someone said it's like he's playing water polo with the ball.
That's the Jokic thing. Yeah.
It does
feel like that. I didn't say it about Cat, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it looks like. And he's got giant hands, and he can get the passes that few can. So in terms of a standstill passer and finding cutters, obviously cutting is not fun when you're not getting the ball. And there's certain cuts that are designed, they're spacing cuts that you're not designed necessarily to get the ball. But if you're going to feel good that you're going to, be hit on that pass, you're just going to do it more, especially out of flow offense, random offense. So clearly the Knicks are getting a huge benefit out of that. And then credit to Cat and those three wings to get in those positions.
Awesome. All right. So that's a nice table setter for us. We're about, I think we're ready now to take some questions. Andrew, if you want to throw the first one up there. And what do you know? It is Kevin Danishevsky. Now, Kevin told me he has loads of questions. I quote, loads of questions. Maybe, Kevin, we need to just condense a bunch of questions into a couple of chats. All right, buddy? We trust you. All right. Kevin says, see you Motzei Shabbos at T Squared. Benjy, love it. Motzei Shabbos meaning Saturday night for those unaffiliated, unaware. Yeah. Andrew, I'm going to shout out the watch party now. There's a watch party Saturday night, guys. Oh, he's got it ready.
So quick. Guy's
a legend.
That is Cat level decision making right there. It's fast, on point. Love it.
Look at this. Saturday, December 21st starts at 7 p.m. at T Squared Social. It is right near Grand Central Station, guys. It is easy to get to for one and all. So please join us. I'm going to be there. I don't think DJ's going to be there, sadly. But I think Andrew's going to be there, and John is going to be there, and maybe others will be there. It's going to be awesome. You have to wear an ugly or worse jersey. And it's going to be a great time. So please come by. Yeah. So Kevin, I'll see you there. Let's continue the questions. So Kevin says, why haven't the Knicks used Mikal/Josh on ball more? Do you think Precious at the 4 helps tomorrow? Oh, he is condensing questions. Do you think Precious at the 4 helps tomorrow versus Randall/Ant? All right. I'll take the first one. and then maybe DJ will take the second one, and then we can
Sure.
switch. All right. So why haven't they used Mikal and Josh on the ball more? Well, I saw this critique a lot after the Atlanta game. What I would say to you is I don't think Mikal's been good on the ball. I think his handle's been shaky. He doesn't look like a confident player on the ball for the most part. And I think that's probably the primary reason why he hasn't been used on the ball a ton. And I think Josh has been used on the ball. He brings up the ball a lot and kind of initiates actions for them, not only in transition, but even in the half court. I like the empty side, Josh Cat pick and roll. I think that's looked good. Maybe they can go to that a little bit more. And that obviously allows you to have your best shooters off the ball when Josh is the one in the action. And with all of that said, I think the primary reason is because Brunson and Cat are devastating. They're a devastating pick and roll combination. And anytime you put anyone else on the ball other than Jalen Brunson, you're not getting the Cat Brunson pick and roll. So sometimes maybe it's a bit much. Maybe they can vary the offense a bit. Maybe it's certainly against a guy like Dyson Daniels, who's giving Brunson trouble, to try to get him off the ball a bit might be wise. I agree. But on the whole, I haven't been too upset with the allocation of who has the ball and who doesn't. What are your thoughts there, Deej?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's a simple game, and you boil it down to when you're running high ball screens, which I presume this is more of what Kevin is trying to get to. Like, can you have Josh and Mikal create offense for you with the ball in their hands? And I just wonder what sort of you're getting out of those actions based on, I don't think either one of those guys are equipped to generate two to the ball to create those rotations. And neither one of them are going to be a pull-up threat. So, I mean, for Hart, it's going to be unders, and what's he getting to out of that? Now, he's done a good job when teams have gone under on him, where he just drives the under and gets a lane he can get into the paint. That's been good, but it's just not going to be a driver of offense. And for Bridges, is he getting some space into like an 18-foot?
Yeah, you got to get a lot of mid-range jumpers against drop.
What he might make enough to be like league average in terms of your points per possession. He's not drawing fouls out of there. And, he's not a, as you mentioned, like his handle, his passing, just not at the level where he's going to create advantages for the big or for the, he's not throwing corner kicks. There's just a limit to what those guys can do. But, in the Atlanta game, would I've liked to see Mikal on the ball a little bit to sort of force Trey into some actions just to have him guard. Yeah, that I think was obvious. But generally speaking, to your point, you have to have a really good reason to take Jalen Brunson off the ball, who I don't think it's been talked about enough, like what an offensive player he's become. All right, so this feels like a crazy statement to make, but I've been thinking about it. Other than Kevin Durant, I think he might have an argument to be the best shooter in the NBA right now in terms of all the, not just catching and shooting. I'm talking pull-ups, mid-range, the step backs, side steps now, his efficiency, his ability to get it in volume. Like, other than Durant, who I think is in his own tier, I think he's got a real argument to be the best shooter right now in the NBA. Because he's so versatile and so efficient, and I think he's sneaking up on the league in terms of that level. I think he might have passed Curry. I really do. I think for where he is right now, I think he might have cleared him. I think
Kyrie with the hot takes. You heard it here. You heard it here, TJ. You heard it here.
Right now, this is not like we're not doing a retrospective.
Better shooter than Steph Curry, which I believe makes Jalen Brunson the best shooter ever.
Well, right now. And listen, if you took Jalen Brunson and Curry and said, take 20 shots from the top of the key in a game, Curry's clearing them, but he's not getting into the mid range with that ability to get his shot off. I don't think right now that he can get the versatility that Brunson has shown for now 3 years in terms of his shooting. I think this is a level of shooter that we're talking about. He's elite of elite right now. So, to Kevin's point, if you're going to take the ball out of that player's hands, like, you have to have an awesome reason to do it, because you pair that with what Cat can do right now. it makes sense why they're the best and most lethal duo in the league in terms of pick and roll, because how do you defend it unless you have a dominant switch heavy scheme that could really disrupt them? But that's like a tiny percentage of the NBA right now. So I think Brunson has become that level of shooter. And I think for him to be off the ball, like, yeah, there's advantages there, but you also have to create the advantage to take advantage of like Brunson being off the ball, and the Knicks don't really have that guy. So there's that aspect to it too. But listen, I understand like trying to take some of the pressure off him right now. That it is a sort of like underrated need of the Knicks to have a secondary creator that you feel really good about, especially in the playoffs. But it's not where they are right now, and Jalen is doing an amazing job of creating offense. Running a ton of high ball screens with Karl Anthony Towns, and it's working to the point that they're one of the greatest offenses in the history of the NBA to this point.
Yeah, you can boil it down to, the value of Jalen Brunson off ball only exists if you can get Jalen Brunson the ball off ball. And if teams are going to basically let Josh Hart and Mikal play 2-on-2, which they will, no one's slinking off of Brunson to open that up. Now, it does give you space. It gives other guys space because no one's going to be slinking off Brunson. So but again, the limited offensive players that they are, what shots are you getting out of that action that's better than whatever Brunson's giving you the ball, right? Yeah. And I think it's a fair point, Kevin, in some matchups for sure. I think you could run some Chicago actions for Mikal. Maybe they haven't done that. They usually run those for OG to give Mikal like a head start so he can maybe get to the rim and other step into the paint. Maybe that's something they can explore a bit because OG is so deliberate in terms of driving the ball that it doesn't open much up at all. And he's been pretty good in those scenarios, but it's just really slow. So yeah, that's an interesting thought in terms of maybe an action that could help out Mikal. All right, let's get to part 2, DJ. You take it first.
Yeah, and so I think in terms of Precious playing the 4, I imagine that's to take the Randall matchup, and we all remember, or I think most of us remember, it was one of the last games OG had played with Toronto. Julius really gave him work. I mean, it was a lot of just physical, impressive shot making. OG really didn't have much of a chance in that particular game to guard Julius, but I still feel good about that matchup. So I would agree that Precious at the 4 in spurts to maybe guard Julius if that matchup proves to be a challenge for Anunoby, but I think I would feel comfortable with that matchup for sure. Now it's the Edwards matchup that I'm a little concerned about because that puts the pressure on Bridges to handle that. I assume it would be him. Maybe it's going to be Josh Hart, but I think because of how many ball screens and his pull-up shooting ability, I think you're probably going to want Bridges guarding Edwards. But in terms of Precious at the 4, I think it's a card you play. I think he's been fine to start the year. I thought he rebounded much better in the Orlando game, but it was him playing the 4 where I thought he was much more engaged, boxing out and keeping Wagner off the offensive glass. So we'll see about him at the 5, but I could see some pressure at the 4 minutes. I think it's a fine card to play. Absolutely. What do you think of that one?
May I make a suggestion?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I can't cat guard Randall.
He definitely can. Put
OG on Rudy. Cooking.
So I think Julius loves the cat matchup. I thought he really took advantage of it in that first OG game last year for the Knicks. I remember
Randall's. I remember the game well. I don't remember Randall. Did Randall go off in that game? I honestly don't remember.
He didn't. Well, he went off. It was like a second quarter barrage, and then quiet, and then he went off in the fourth quarter. In the fourth quarter, I don't remember it being mostly on Cat, and I could be misremembering sort of how that turned out. But I guess I would be worried about like foul trouble and those sorts of things. But and also like, are you keeping Cat so far away from the basket that your defensive rebounding is compromised? Because Julius has been shooting the ball well this year, so he's gonna have to guard him.
Right, keeping Rudy off the offensive glass might be the biggest concern for me.
Yeah.
With OG down there. Honestly, I worry about OG's foul trouble on Randall, with those freaking arm swings underneath that he does so well.
He reaches in. Yeah.
OG's got to be really careful early, and he's gotten some foul trouble this year. Yeah, this matchup's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait to watch. I think the matchups are really interesting. I would guess Bridges starts on Ant, and I think OG will see time on him as well. But I think that's where you start. But
Yeah.
I would love to see some juice on him too.
Yes, absolutely. And if you haven't been paying attention to Minnesota, all Anthony Edwards does is shoot threes now. He's got the craziest 3-point rate in the NBA. It's got to be top 5 in the league.
Yeah, but no one's talking about the fact that like when you maybe someone is talking about it, and I'm just not paying attention. But like when you replace Cat with Julius, and as well as Julius has shot the ball this year, like you have now Julius Gobert as your front court. The spacing is not as good. The avenues to the rim are not as clear. And so I think much as I think part of it is like, he's shooting the 3-ball great. So he's shooting a ton of threes. I don't think he has the driving lanes he did last year. So it is explainable to an extent based on the change you made in personnel,
right?
That he's taking more threes.
That's fair. And I haven't watched enough to know like how are they treating Julius as a shooter?
Certainly not like Cat.
Right. No, 100%. Like, are they just not leaving him? Are they just ignoring him? I don't think Julius ever gets ignored out there because I feel like his driving is good enough to where he could just eat up space. But it's a fair point about like him just not being guarded. Not forget Cat. Like, is he being guarded like a good shooter? And that's that's part of why he's shooting so well because of the open looks.
All right. Thanks, Kev.
Thank you.
Jonathan Macri says, just here to say hi. I mean, you should be here asking questions, John. So,
could have thrown a question in there. I mean, that would have killed you.
Wouldn't have killed him. Absolutely.
Anyway,
no effort.
thank you.
No effort for the dean of Knicks Film School. Frank Sound. Hey, guys. Have you watched Avdia in Portland? I'd like him in NY. Thoughts? Much love, guys. Deej?
So I'm going to be very transparent. Like, I haven't seen a ton of Portland basketball, and I'm not saying that to be like funny or as a joke. I haven't gotten around to them, to be honest. I will say, like, I've always Advia is really interesting to me because I love him as a defender and just have felt underwhelmed with him as an offensive player. I just don't think the shooting, and I don't know, you can tell me right now, you might be shooting 40% from 3. Like, I don't have like the visibility on that right now, but I've always considered him like a guy you can guard comfortably 2 through 4, maybe some 5s, like physical. As I felt like he's always give Julius like a little bit of a trouble when he was with Washington. I thought he's always guarded Jalen well, but Jalen just made like amazing shots against him and talked a lot of smack back at him. But he's a really good defender. He's versatile. I think he's good in transition. He's a heady passer, good awareness. Like, he could probably fit everywhere and fit on most teams because of his versatility. I don't know what appetite Portland has to like move him. I feel like he'd be a player you want to have like in your core as you try to build around whatever they're going to build around. You want to have like stable wings to kind of round out your team. But yeah, I mean, the Knicks could use another like big wing. I think it's a need for this team. I don't know if he is necessarily a gettable piece for them, but he's interesting. I've always found him like a fascinating defender. I just don't love his offense. Where are you on Advia right now?
Yeah, I was just looking at his contract. So he's got, I mean, the contract slot makes a lot of sense for what the Knicks have to offer. He makes a descending deal, which the Knicks love.
Mm-hmm.
Starts at 15.6 this year, then 14.3, 13.1, 11.8. It's a really nice deal. I mean, that is a team-friendly, really nice deal that I think is valuable. And because it's valuable, though, I'm not sure what we have to give Portland. They're not going to be so interested in Mitchell Robinson. I don't know what they want, but as a target, yes, I think it's the right idea. Certainly the right idea. I was just looking at the numbers. He's averaging 12, 6, and 3 on 43, 36, 78 splits. So he's shooting 36% from 3. I don't think there's a ton of gravity there. I don't think teams care much. He's only shooting 4 a game, not nothing, which is a career high. So I like the player a lot. Obviously, listen, we stick up for our fellow Jews. I'm a big fan. I do follow him, but he's to DJ's point, there's offensive game is still coming. I think there's room to grow, but that's the right idea for a player. I just don't know if Portland has any reason to give him up, which is why like a name like DFS makes more sense to me. Like, the Nets are going to be in a fire sale mode. DFS is 32. They have no reason to keep him.
Yeah.
And you don't just, the value is not going to be the same as an Avdi on a 4-year team friendly deal at whatever, he's 27, 28 years old. So yeah,
24 years
he's
old.
only 24. Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I mean.
Yeah,
There's a lot of value there. I don't see I love the target. I don't see it as a realistic one, I guess is where I'm going to get there.
I like where you're thinking, Frank, though.
Yes, sir. All right. Go ahead.
Andrew P., thank you so much for the contribution. Why isn't Mikal helping run the second unit? I think this goes back to what we talked about. I know he has had moments in Brooklyn where that's looked good, him running the show, particularly that first run with them where he was just an amazing lights out shot maker and just made everything. You saw the second year where it just, what are you gaining out of Mikal Bridges, like running the show? Like, what does that mean to me when we're talking about running a second unit? You're the kind of the fulcrum of an offense. You're creating advantages and you are the one sort of where the offense is built around. I just don't think that is the recipe for a good offense. And the bar to be a good offense in the NBA right now is at an insane level. So I think for the second unit, it's much more about the pace they play, the speed of what Payne can do, what McBride can do, the shot making from three. I think those are the things that you have to hope the second unit can utilize to be an effective group. I don't think it's Mikal Bridges like running a bunch of high ball screens and generating offense. I think that is not in the cards right now. So he at least hasn't shown it to this point. I think you're better off for the second unit, just trying to just play faster, get shots up, get threes up, energy. Like those are the avenues to where the second unit could be effective. It's not necessarily Mikal Bridges running your offense.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, he is playing with the second unit. I mean, he's playing basically the whole game, so he's definitely playing with the second unit a lot. The Knicks have a luxury that Karl Towns is always in the game when Brunson isn't. So when we're talking about the second unit, I think we're basically saying when Brunson sits, right? So that's the first sub, Cat. So Cat starts the second quarter, right? He comes out first, and he starts the second quarter. So that's when Bridges stays in the game often. And I think Bridges does do more when Brunson sits. And I think you will see him, especially like in semi-transition, run a little pick and roll. But the Knicks also have the luxury of their bench guys, their best bench guys are like a point guard and a half. Like Cam Payne runs a very functional pick and roll. And it's actually like pretty valuable to have him on the ball with Bridges off of it, doing all the things that Bridges does off the ball. And Deuce McBride comes in off the bench and he's part of that unit too. And like, not that he's great on the ball, but he's okay. And like, he could be running some of your pick and rolls. So it's just kind of like based on who the substitutions are, what Mikal has done well and what he hasn't done so well this year. Plus you have running stuff through Cat. It doesn't seem necessary for him to help run the second unit. And those units have been very good. So like, I don't think there's much evidence to say that Bridges needs to do more with those units specifically. I think they've actually done a really good job balancing who initiates actions with those units, and those units have succeeded so far this season. I think, again, to my first point at the beginning of the show, like I'm pretty surprised at how good those units have been. So, yeah, but I see where you're coming from, Andrew. I do think Mikal can do more. I think it's coming. I think he's gaining confidence. Maybe more in like a Chicago action kind of way than like a straight pick and roll, but I think there's more to utilize there. Thanks for the chat, bud.
Thank you.
Lumbar says we have seen spurts of all three backup fives that are currently on the roster. This is a great question. In your opinion, who is the best option until reinforcements come? What do you got, Deej?
I'm throwing this one to me.
I'll take it.
No, go ahead. I got to think about it a little bit. Go ahead. You go first.
I think the best option based on track record is still Precious Achiuwa. And I think it's fair to have a little bit of patience with him since he hasn't played much this year yet. I know he's gotten beaten up on the boards at the 5 so far, but he does give them an element at the 5 that no other big on the roster does, like the extreme switchability he gives you. You can switch across all positions if the right lineup is in, which is an exciting look that the Knicks have shown very sparingly, but I think is an exciting idea. It's just, to me, the only question is defensive rebounding. I don't know, because if you feel like you have to play Josh Hart with him to secure your rebounding, well, now you're playing Precious and Josh Hart together, and your spacing is pretty rough. So I don't know what the right answer is to that issue. I think maybe it's just Precious doing a little bit better on the boards, but I still think you have to have the most confidence. Precious has shown, he has a track record in the NBA of being a solid rotation big. And that said, Sims has done really good work this season. I know he's in the doghouse now because of a couple of really ridiculous turnovers that were absolutely ridiculous when they happened. But the numbers are still great with the rim protection. He's still below 40% in terms of shots taken against him within 6 feet. He's done a really good job defensively. He's a monster offensive rebounder. So I'm not giving up on Sims. I think it's fine that he's kind of situational right now. I think he's a solid situational big, maybe just below a rotation big, which I think is fine to have as, their 58th pick a few years ago. That's great value, actually. And I think the 3 backup fives, I guess the third is a Huck Porty.
Yeah.
Love what I've seen in flashes, but you also see the flashes of him not really just knowing like basic rotations defensively.
Mm-hmm.
He's just been in the wrong place too often defensively, and I think that's why he's lost Tibbs' trust. But I'll tell you what, the fact that when he goes to Huck Porty, he stays with him for like spurts tells you that Tibbs sees a lot in that player. So I've seen nothing wrong. And he also got hurt recently, so he's been out. He hurt an ankle, I think. But I have no issue with him right now doing what Sims did his first year as the 58th pick or whatever, which was spend some time in the G League, learn in the system, get better rotationally, defensively, so that when he is called upon, he's ready. But I do like what I've seen. And I think, honestly, the ceiling is certainly higher than Sims because he's got offensive touch. And he's
just bigger too.
Like he's just bigger. He's a beast.
Yeah.
So for him, it's like a really smart development pick, I think, by the Knicks, because I think you have the outlines of a very solid backup pick. It just might be next year or the year after more than it is this year.
Yeah, I think if he could figure out just the basics of positional defense, like he's going to be better than Sims because he's already, I think, a more advanced roller to the rim in terms of he can catch it, the short roll, he can make a pass, he can put it on the floor and finish. I think because of his size, he could get over. I think despite Sims' leaping ability and despite that dunk earlier in the year, I think Huck Porty is probably a better vertical finisher than Sims right now. It's just the defense, as you talked about, is just not where it needs to be, but his upside, I think, is higher than where Jericho is right now. But in terms of Achua and Sims, like, it's interesting because we had this Tibbs comments. I don't know if it was a report or I forget who had the report. Someone reported that Tibbs doesn't really view Precious as a 5. And I think it was this was like off-season sort of talk. And I know he thinks Jericho can be a viable 5 in moments at least. So I think the defensive rebounding part of it, Tibbs is just going to lean so heavily in that category that it's just going to keep it closer than I think the talent and even the resume suggests in terms of like which player he prefers. I think Achua, for me personally, is the best out of the group because of you talked about the switchability in terms of like he could put the ball on the floor a little bit. Like when he gets into like a DHO, like there's just like there's flexibility, there's movement. He can sort of like reject it and get downhill and do something with it from the perimeter and try to get into a finish. There's a little more there. And I still hold out hope that eventually there's going to be like some semblance of shooting from the corners, although he's 25 years old or close to it. So maybe you're shaking your head. Yeah. You got no, all right. I got a modicum of hope.
I have as much hope as like the Isaiah Hartenstein stretch 5 nonsense that's been going on for 5 straight years. And every fan base that gets it was like, he's going to become a stretch 5. And I'm like, guys, he's not going to become a stretch 5. He's really good, but he's not going to become a stretch 5. Anyway, continue.
Well, yeah, I agree with. So maybe even if he never becomes like a shooter, there's just a little more offensive.
Yeah.
He's a little more dynamic with the ball in his hands, which, it's not nothing. So he loves a
little fake handoff action. Loves that.
Yeah. So I think you could do more with him. It's just like, can he hold up on if he can't rebound the basketball well enough, then it's just not a non-starter and I think the coach is right. I think if you can't rebound the ball with him playing the 5, then it's just not an option. That's just, you can't do it.
And part of that is the Knicks being small at the wing. And OG's not small, but he's not a particularly great rebounder.
Yeah. And
the rest of their wings are small. So it's, if you look, maybe if a DFS came in, a guy like that who's like huge, but I don't know. I wonder if it should be more matchup dependent, which is not really a Tibbs thing to do. He kind of like has his rotation, but because of the issues that all of them present in different ways, like, yeah, you put Precious in there against like the Magic, like a freaking beat you up physical team. Like, yeah, they're going to get some offensive rebounds, but there are teams in the league who don't play that way at all. Atlanta's same thing. Like they brought Precious in at the 5 and he got destroyed because it's freaking Capella and Okongwu, who were like these huge, tough centers. Capella's one of the best offensive rebounders in the league. So that's tough to ask. But if they're playing, I don't know, the Pistons with like Isaiah Stewart at center in the backup unit, like, and you want to just get really switchable and kind of slow down the pick and roll attack, like, yeah, then go to it. And if it's a big rebounding team, then go to Sims. Like, I would love to see a little bit more of that flexibility at the back end of your rotation, because the Knicks don't have like a clear answer right now. And when you don't have a clear answer, I think you can go to that kind of matchup approach. I'd like to see that. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd like to see it.
Yeah. Thank you, Lombard.
Deej?
Chumpalumps 1. I really liked. This is why you give this one to me.
Yep.
2 seconds left on the shot clock. Pass this one off. Grenade.
Josh Hart drills it.
Of course. I really like Shem. He's like 60% on those shots this year.
I actually think he's 100%.
He might be 100%.
I put a fake stat out on Twitter and everyone thought it was real. I felt kind of bad. I said something like, Josh Hart has made 100% of shots within 2 seconds of the shot clock after a dribble. And people were just like, wow, that's
great
crazy.
Ever. I really like Shamet in the preseason. When he is back with the team, do you think he can make it and make an impact in areas that are lacking? Yeah, I see. I am in a wait and see approach with him, because I don't. If you're going to play McBride in Payne, like, how is he fitting? Like, I'm having trouble envisioning the lineup that he makes sense in terms of being in your every night, like, 9-man rotation. Like, how does that? He's small and he plays small. And I think you have to mitigate that in some way. And the Knicks in certain points this year have looked really small on the defensive end. And I feel like it's hurt them a little bit. Maybe situational, but can you ask it this way? Can he be in your 9-man rotation with, Cameron Payne and Deuce McBride coming off the bench with him? How does that?
How
does that make sense?
He can make an impact for sure. Yes. Like, I think if that's the question, I think he can. I would like it to be more as a stopgap until they find another wing somewhere, than as like a permanent solution to their wing issues. I think just in terms of lowering the minutes on McHale and OG and Hart, and having at least another guy who's above 6'4" on the roster is a good thing. I think he'll bring their 3-point rate up, which I think is a good thing, because he lets it fly. He's not, I think there's a bit more of like a reputational shooter than an actual shooter, but I think he has real gravity and he can shoot on the move, which is something the Knicks don't really have. Mm-hmm. So I like that element to their offense. It adds a little element, and they showed that in the preseason. And those lineups did look very dynamic offensively, I think. And he plays hard defensively, just not very big or physical. So, yeah, I think he can help and make an impact. This idea that he's like some kind of savior for them as a bench option, he's Landry Shamet. Like, he's bouncing around the league for a reason. He can't seem to hold a job, even though every team gives him a chance that he's on to hold the rotation spot, and he seems to lose it on every team he's on. I think if he actually made 38% of his threes, then that would be one thing. But so, yeah, I like Shamet. I think he will get a chance. He's better than Matt Ryan. He is like a quasi rotation player in the league, back end. But I think for this team to get to where they need to get to, I think they do need another better wing, probably, preferably bigger wing to back up the start.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fair. And he's been like 10 threes per game. His 3-point rate has been like 10 per 100 possessions, which is right around the number you want to be as like a shooter to have the gravity and the volume. So despite like the 33% he shot last year, like there's, to your point, there's reputational stuff there that I think teams, he might be overrated as a shooter, but I don't get any indication that he is not being defended like he is a good shooter. So I think he is just one of
No,
those
it's
guys
like kind of like the Wayne Ellington effect.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of like the Wayne Ellington effect, where like he looks like a shooter and he moves like a shooter and he shoots off the move, and that just draws defenses in a way. The ability to get it up is valuable. Like teams still, even if you're a 5 percentage point shooter, teams don't want to give that up, right? And so
no, and listen, the Knicks
sometimes you'll draw through to the ball on like little actions like that too. So it's valuable,
right? And then Duncan Robinson, a little drop off pass on the whoever set that screen, that pin down, they blitz it. That's the pass that like Korver made a living on, and Redick, Duncan Robinson, so he can make that play for sure. And since Fournier, the Knicks have not had like a really like high level movement, fly off a screen, catch and just get it up shooter. Like there's guys that can shoot off like quasi movement. It's like fake movement where it's like off like a DHO or like a little bit of like. They're not like bending the defense in ways that Fournier did when he was like really lighting it up for the Knicks that first year, or how Shamet can really at his best can bend a defense. Like that is a real skill. You're so small in the second unit that is the part where I have a little bit of skepticism, but they do need to soak up minutes. So if you're just trying to like, all right, we have to get these minutes into like a reasonable position for our starters. Like he's an NBA quality player in a 9-man rotation. Like there's probably, you can argue that. So for that reason alone, shooter, like he should play. It's fair.
All right. Thanks, Chumpalump. You're the best, Chumpalump. Parrish Duggar, thank you for the very generous contribution, Parrish. We appreciate this. We're a serious program, and we should be getting super chats. He says Tibbs is getting a pass on misplay of the roster. Oh, he got his money's worth too. Failure to build on Pac-Man's hot start. We haven't talked about Pac-Man yet. Sims 2 bad games and yanked when Precious is a splash play and then bad. Failure to play Huck and Sims against length with cat rebounds and D. There were a lot of capitals. I tried to emphasize them. And he further goes, Parrish, 5-out offenses overrated with 2-star players. I guess 2 out of 5 stars offensive players.
Hey, Benji, you cut out. Can you please reread this super chat?
Are you serious?
Yeah, I want the emphasis on overrated again. That's all.
Oh, I thought you were serious. 5-out offenses overrated with 2-star players. Thank you, Andrew. All right. Can you put up the previous one so we can address it? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Where do you start?
Okay. So misplay of the roster. I think there are fair criticisms of Tibbs so far this season. I think the minutes are out of hand. I do think part of the minutes being out of hand was that he knew he had this very break. At least right before the cup. I don't know if that's true, actually. Yeah, I think the minutes have been crazy. Probably could have thrown Pac-Man in there for a few minutes when they had no other options. Towns playing 43 minutes against Orlando was a lot. Sims, because Precious came back, I'm not going to get upset that Sims got pulled. I think Sims is a situational guy. I think that's what he is. But I think he's a solid situational guy. I'm not going to get upset about Sims getting pulled from the rotation. Precious is a splash play and then bad. Yeah, I so far Precious has been a bit up and down. Like he'll make a great play, but in general, I don't know if the impact's been great. But I think Precious showed you last year what he can do. I think he's a solid rotation big who gives you a little versatility. Do I love Precious Achiuwa? Like, do I think Precious needs to be the backup on this team? No, but I think he's solid. I think he needs you should have a little patience because he hasn't played much this year. So I think, have some grace there. Failure to play Huck and Sims against length with cat rebounds and D. Yeah, I think it's a fair critique to say maybe he could have tried against certain matchups Cat with a big other than Precious. I don't really care that much, to be totally honest, because I think watching Cat at the 5 and I think information gathering with Cat at the 5 is really important for this team. And the more minutes they play with Cat at the 5, the more they learn about themselves and what they need around that, if it's a viable strategy at all to get to the highest levels. So I don't mind it, but I think it's at least a fair critique to say in some matchups, you could have gone to those kinds of lineups. Anyway, those are all my thoughts on the various critiques of Tom Thibodeau that Parrish has. What do you got?
Yeah, well, I think there's certainly I think the minutes have been insane, too much. I feel like you could have figured out a way to get those down a little bit. In his defense, the record is fine, but if the goal was to we need to keep minutes at a lower level, like how many games are you losing because you're not playing your best players and you're playing Dadier real minutes consistently? You're going to rookies at 19 years old drafted in the late first round, are not going to be good NBA players. We have to just be the odds of that happening are so slim. It's to expect Bacom Dadier to be a good rotation player today is just asking too much.
Yeah. I mean, look, on that, I went to watch him in Westchester. I watched him live there.
Give us a breakdown. Love it.
He's not dominating on that level right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you guys know, we've watched it now for years, the way the Knicks utilize their G League and their draft picks is they go down there and if they're good, they dominate. Deuce dominated. Even Sims in his own way dominated those games as a physical presence.
Well, Kolek recently had a 30.
Kolek is dominating when he plays down there. Dadier is not. He's actually had some struggle. When I watched him, he was I don't know, he was 4 for 12 from the field or something. Certainly not dominating the game on either end. I like Pack. I like him. And I think the shot, the stationary 3-point shot is good. That's a huge deal for a wing in the NBA. If that's the starting point, what a great starting point. The size is great. There's not much going on to the rim. He's shown some real great flashes defensively in one-on-one situations already. So I think the foundation is wonderful. But like Hakporti, you just got to be realistic about it taking some time for him to get good enough defensively, especially to get consistent minutes in the NBA. And again, there's no problem with taking it slow with a guy like this. He's 19, developing him in the G League, having him at practice, having him watch the film before you just throw him out there. And all of that said, Deej, I think we'd agree, could you have given him 6 minutes and 7 minutes to just spell OG on an occasional night? Yeah, probably.
Sure. And I think that's certainly fair. But I also think we need the context of what this season is. And I said this before the year, this is the most important, the most pressure Tom Thibodeau has ever had in his coaching career. I think this team has a certain goal in mind. They didn't have a training camp. Preseason is what it is. You're trying, I think the argument that you just need to build reps is a fair one. Now I know he is always going to edge on a border of it being grotesquely awful minute allocation, irresponsible. I get that. And there's been games where Cats checked in that up 20 with 2 minutes to go. I forget what game it was, but it was earlier in the season, ridiculous, odd things. But again, I always go back to if the minutes instead of 36 a game, there were 34, what is the actual benefit that player is getting out of those 2 less minutes per game? I don't know the answer. I don't know if anyone actually knows the answers to these things, but I just it looks egregious when you have a starting lineup playing 38 minutes and it feels wrong, but I don't think it's easy to articulate in a way that's has evidence backing it to where it's these are the reasons why 38 minutes a game is just not going to sustain over a long period of time. And I don't want to hear about last year because I think most of those injuries were freak injuries that had nothing to do with wear and tear or any of those things. So I am a little more willing to defend Tibbs in terms of the minutes. And listen, I don't think Hakporti and Sims with Cat is the way to go if you're trying to extract the best version of this team. I think Achua with Cat makes a little more sense, but even that, the spacing is compromised, and
yes.
We've seen Cat in space. really good, and the drives have been much better this year based on the fact that he is driving in a 5-out look in a lot of ways, and those driving lanes are just wide open. So I don't think you want to take that away if you can avoid it. We'll see when Mitch, if and when he comes back healthy and he can play real NBA minutes, like what if he goes to that look. But again, you're going to run into the same offensive spacing issues, and you have to, trade off with like what you're gaining on the defensive end. So I understand where Parrish is coming from, and I think it's like reasonable to want more, spread these minutes out a little bit, but also like am willing to defend Tibbs in the sense like he doesn't have a lot of talent on that bench, and I just don't know if guys are playing 36 minutes a night, it's going to markedly change like their outlook and their ability to perform at a high level.
Yeah, I think 38 versus 36 is different from 43 or 44 to 36, which has happened with Brunson and Cat and certainly Bridges. And Bridges I care less about because even though he runs a ton, he's not a very physical guy. But like we know Brunson takes a beating every night because he falls on a lot of guys.
I feel like his minutes have been...
He's generally protected. Yeah, he's generally protected, Brunson. That one game when he was questionable and then played the whole second half was a bit much, but
yeah. Well, it's actually he's at 34 minutes a night, which is the lowest he's had in his 3 years with the Knicks. So
yeah,
his minutes are under. He's under 35 minutes a night.
Parrish continues his tirade. The record is awful against plus 500 teams.
Well,
what is the record?
Well, that's a fair question. I don't have the record in front of me, but
Andrew, if you could pull the record, I think it's probably right
on it.
Thank you.
The schedule has been relatively easy this year, and since the defensive rating has really started to improve, it's been against really bad opponents. So I think it's fair to wonder about how real that defensive rating is over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I just saw a tweet that against top 20 offenses, the Knicks have the 28th best defense in the league.
Right, which that's a problem. But I will say their offense, I feel like the offense is good against.
All right, Parrish. They're 6-6 against top plus 500 teams. We're moving on from Parrish. You can finish your thought though.
He has 2 more comments, by the way.
Terrific.
Hold
on. Just to wrap it really quick. I think the offense has looked, despite the Houston game, the Cleveland game, I feel like the offense has actually done pretty well against really good defenses. Boston, I thought they played pretty well. I thought they obviously their first Orlando game, they crushed it offensively against a great defense. So the offense I'm less concerned about, to be honest. The defense against a really high level offense, like it's a huge question mark at this point, to be fair. Parrish again
played out of his confidence. His defense is capable. We agree. We agree, Parrish. He's capable. Teach.
Parrish just firing away. Tibbs, TIBBS, by the way. Tibbs has become the Mark Jackson before Steve Kerr. Well, who's our Steve Kerr then?
Whoever's next.
Whoever's next. All right.
That's all this is. It's who's next.
Where would you rate Benjy? Give me your honest assessment.
Oh boy.
Put Tom Thibodeau in the coaching ranking. Is he in the top 10? You don't have to give me the actual like where you don't have to rank him. But
I don't know
like back end.
I don't know offhand if he's top 10, but he's definitely, I think, above average. But it's also hard to grade. And especially when you don't, I think he's a very good coach. Okay. I think there is potential for, I don't think it's a little extreme, the Mark Jackson for Steve Kerr, but I don't think it's a crazy thought that it could be that Tibbs isn't the answer to take this roster.
He's coaching the best offense in the history of the NBA.
I'm not saying he's not doing a good job this season. He is doing a good job.
Oh, by that definition, he's doing an amazing job. I mean, can you do much better than the best offense in the history of the NBA? I think that's right? Aren't they still the best offense?
They're up.
They dropped to second in offensive rating because of the Atlanta and the Orlando game. But to your point, it's literally like 2 games ago.
I'm not saying he's not doing a great job this year. He's doing a great job this year. And I actually think, contrary to Kirk Goldsberry's 4 quadrants, there's more evidence that Tom Thibodeau is a good offensive coach than there is that he's a good defensive coach over the course of his career.
So that's good. That's the point then, Benjy. To what you're saying is they should fire Tibbs and get a defensive coach in here that can help boost the defense, is what you're saying.
I think Fizdale's a good defensive coach.
You know what? You're onto something. Look at what they're doing. Where is he now? Phoenix?
He's on some
He's
team.
he's in Phoenix. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Parrish, for the back and forth. We appreciate it. We've got a busy barrage before you guys get out of here.
Wow. After a Parrish barrage, a busy barrage. All right.
Exactly. A Parrish party and now a busy barrage. Let's do this.
Did you take the busy?
Sure, busy. GMAC wanted to bring up that the defensive scheme is bad and too much of the blame goes to Mikal. They play a lot of drop with Mikal, which Mikal is supposed to trail the ball handler. They do play a lot of drop. Another one. The difference between DDV trailing and Mikal is iHeart and Mitch versus Cat. They should get the ball moving in the air more with more aggressive defense that would play into their wings who want to play passing lanes.
Wow.
That's a lot going on there.
How'd you get the passing lanes acronym?
I don't know.
I was thinking Premier League. Josh Hart is the Premier League fan. Maybe he wants to go play for Arsenal. I don't know.
All right. Well, they have played more drop of late. And I think right now that is their best defensive option. I think the Cat playing aggressive at the level, hedging, blitzing, I think it's just a disaster. I know it's so funny because I know that was the thought coming into the year where you want to get him out of drop and you want to get him more aggressive. I thought in the playoffs, like that was a mess when he was more aggressive, like him trying to rotate out of it and get back matched up. Like it didn't look good to me. And I feel like in drop, he's at least in better defensive rebounding position, which I think is it gets overlooked a little bit, is like when you're dropping back, you're right at the restricted area and you are in like perfect rebounding position. And he's been a great defensive rebounder. So I think if you're going to have him more aggressive, then you're just going to rely more on OG and Hart to manage the defensive backboards, which is a question mark. And I think if you want your best rebounder in drop closer to the rim, trying to clean up a little bit. And then I think Mikal, as you pointed out in Phoenix, this was the defense he was best at. He played passing lanes. Yes, he was good in isolation, but his value to me was extracted out of the fact that you can put him on Dame Lillard for 40 minutes and he could do a good job defending guys like that. And you felt good about it. So I think that is that to me was the hope, is that you're going to play Cat and drop a lot. You're going to rely on Mikal getting over the top of screens, and you're going to try to keep things in front, and he's going to rear contest, and you're going to be okay. Yes, he has not been good getting over screens, but you pointed out some Atlanta possessions where he actually was pretty good in that coverage. So I think the hope is he gets better, and then the drop is kind of what you need to be to handle the defensive rebounding aspect of it. But I don't love scrambling around and trying to hedge and then recover, and then you're in rotation, you're Xing out, and you're peel switching. It just, to me, you can execute those things, but for a team that has not been high level in terms of their communication, like, do you really want this Knicks roster, this defensive group, like running around trying to communicate matchups again? Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like that would be the most fruitful way of going defensively. But I don't know. Give me your thoughts on the Cat drop versus more aggressive aspect.
I think it's been probably the most interesting schematic thing to watch this season, because we started in full drop, and then for about a period of a couple of weeks we went to like a blitz / hedge, and then we went right back to drop for the last, I would say, 2 weeks. And I think the drop with Mikal playing better, which I think he has of late, is the way you get from 24th in defense to 15th in defense, which is what they've essentially done over the last few weeks, with an assist playing against bad offenses. But to get fundamentally sound, force some mid-range jumpers, rebound, and just be solid in that base coverage is how you make the progress they've made. I absolutely believe it to be the case that they cannot win a championship playing drop all the time with Cat in drop. Like I don't think there's any world where they can win a championship that way. I think they have to be able to be versatile in their schemes. You have to be able to show blitz. You have to be able to show switch once in a while. You have to be able to put Cat on 4s and OG on 5s once in a while, which they did a few times early in the season and never went back to it. And I get drop as the security blanket, and I think rightfully so. I just worry that it becomes over-relied upon because the other stuff hasn't worked as well as they would have liked. But I think they need to practice that stuff. I think they need to work on that stuff because I think it will be necessary in certain matchups and to have the option to go to those matchups when you have to, and mix it up against the greatest players in the league who, when they see something for too long, they figure it out. Look what Trae Young did in Atlanta, right? You just kind of figure stuff out by the second half when you see the same drop over and over and over again. And you got to be able to pivot, I think. So I'm somewhere in between Busy and you, DJ. I get it. I get that they're going to drop needs to be the base. I get it, but I think we want to see a little bit more versatility in terms of pivoting out of it, based on matchup, and then just based on like to get your own practice reps in.
That makes sense. And then they did a little bit like pre-switch out of it, so you get if you can, and this is always like dependent on where the screen is being set, and can you get OG Anunoby like pre-switching where he's guarding the ball, Cat matches up with whoever he was guarding, like that. That can't be your base defense, because that's also, you have to be aligned to where you're not scrambling and then you're leaving a shooter wide open. So there's certainly you have to be more versatile in the playoffs and against big time teams. That I 100% agree with. I just and it is also worth noting that you do have to get these reps in now, and even if you're going to hemorrhage points, like the reps do matter. So you can't just be drop and then, all right, in the playoffs start, now we're going to hedge and we're going to blitz and we're going to scram switch or peel switch and do all these things. Like you have to be able to have these things practiced and at least be somewhat comfortable with it. But in terms of the base, as you said, I think drop is just the way to go. And also like I love OG like in a stationary position, just like lunging at ball handlers. Like it's just
nobody better.
This has been one of the most like fun things to sort of monitor this year. He's awesome at it.
The fencer's lunge.
Yeah, it's incredible. We talk about flexibility. Like I know he falls all the time, but his like ability to like get low in a crouch and like
gets
just like
in crazy
explode.
Defensive positions that no one else in the league can at his size. He gets in like, it's crazy. It's actually crazy.
6'8", 230, 240. He's just a really unique athlete.
Yes, he is. Busy. In the Atlanta game, Cat had 2 feet in the lane while Mikal was getting screened at the 3-point line. Is that defense? How then do you blame Mikal? Play 2v1. How then do you play 2 feet in the?
So he's saying Cat's deep in a drop. Like, how do you expect Mikal to get over the screen? Mikal is not guarding 2 versus 1 because you're not worried about whoever the Atlanta big is setting that screen. They're not a pop threat, and if they're rolling into Cat. So it's not necessarily a 2 versus 1. It's just, it is asking a lot of any player to get over a screen set at 30 feet when you're Trae Young and your big is in the paint. But again, I go back to like, this is why you traded 5 first-round picks for him, because
you're asking a lot of them.
Because you're asking a lot of them, and this is what he's done. He's shown that it's not like we haven't seen this. And he's not 32, like he's 27, 28 years old. Like he still should have this in him, at least like 90% of it left, where this could be an effective defense. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy. It certainly is not easy. And there's it's probably the toughest like thing to ask of any like defensive player in the NBA right now, with the amount of ball screens, the amount of pull-up shooting ability, and like Trae Young's ability to like, is he actually like floating? Is he taking the floater? Is he throwing the lob? Like there's just so much.
Yeah. And by the way, they did a good job on him for much of that game. Like I know the second half got a little rough, but frankly, that game was lost on offensive rebounds more than Trae Young breaking them down. I know he had a big third quarter. I know he rolled the dice on the logo. I know it was cheesy as hell, but like ultimately you did a pretty good job on him. That's not why they lost that game. And I think Bridges was okay. in that game defensively. I think he's had even better games of late. Like, I thought he did great on. I know Jalen Suggs is not a very good offensive player, but I think Bridges had a lot to do with his crazy struggles in that game. So
yes.
he's getting there. He's getting there. And the drop, look, Busy. The drop, there's a reason that every team plays some drop. There's not a team in the league who doesn't play any drop. Like that. I mean, maybe like even the like Şengün, Jokic, they pretty much are always at the level, but like they're once in a while in drop too. Everyone plays some drop because it is the old reliable. You know, you have your defense. Everyone stays in front, right? Everyone stays in front, and you can see, you know, where the shots are going to come from. So like it is a important defensive strategy for every team to some extent, and the Knicks should play some. But I agree with you, Busy, that they could vary it more.
Yeah. Busy, thank you. Those are good. Those are really good.
Yep.
Kevin Danishevsky, thank you, Kevin, again for contributing and being here with us. General NBA. All right. I personally love the three because it equals more ball movement, and Naismith literally wanted a finesse sport. Go watch football if you don't like it. Kevin,
this is some last
throwing the gauntlet down. I have some thoughts on this. Do you want to take the first stab, or you want me to just go?
I want to hear your thoughts.
All right. So I think the NBA I think the game right now is, in terms of the quality of play, is the best it's been ever. From my personal viewing, like I can't get enough of it. Like I find it, like I'm really like in the weeds and like how teams are gaining their all these 3-point looks. I think the argument that teams are doing it in varied ways is true. I think it's completely reasonable to suggest that teams are much more varied in their actions than I think some of the national media and like casual fandom suggests. Like everyone is shooting threes. It's LA Fitness. It's open runs, and it's random basketball. The only team like truly playing like random basketball is the Memphis Grizzlies, and they're literally the only team that plays this way. So it's fun to see them every once in a while because they don't really run plays, and it's pretty wild. But most teams are just generating a bunch of threes, but they're doing it in very different ways. So I enjoy it. Now the question, and I think this is where Kevin's point is coming from, is like the discourse around NBA ratings is not only about the 3-point shot, but it is like heavily weighted in like, has the game become to the casual fan like very monotonous? Because if you turn on a game and you don't know about like, you know, split cuts and zoom actions and all these different ways teams get exit screens and all these ways teams are generating 3-point looks, you're just seeing the end result of a guy shooting a three. And if you grew up in the 90s or in the 2000s and that was like your favorite NBA era, like the game was more varied then. It was more diverse. Or teams had signature styles, players had signature styles. Like that is a real criticism of the current NBA. Is like it is. Yes, I know Luka plays different than Shea. I know they play different than Jokic and Edwards, but again, they're all shooting a ton of threes. And in the 2000s and the 90s, like you can go from like Vince Carter to Allen Iverson to Michael Jordan to Jason Kidd, and like everyone had like their own style, and these were like superstars at the top of the game. So I think there's a fair critique or wonder about like, has the game become too reliant on the 3-point shot just in terms of the entertainment product to a mass audience? And I feel like the NBA, I know, are thinking about this because the discourse is so prevalent right now. And the question is like, what do you do, if anything, to try to mitigate it? But I think it's something to be concerned about, because the game, you need casual fans. You need like the French fans to come in and like boost up ratings and buy tickets and like be part of the culture. So I think it's something the NBA has to wrestle with. It doesn't matter that I'm watching, because I'm going to watch regardless of what the quality of play is going to be. They have me. I'm locked in. It's just like my neighbor who's like hasn't watched a game this year and watched 25 last year and like 50 the year before. He was telling me like it's gone down year after year. And it's not because of Inside the NBA. Like he doesn't even know about Inside the NBA. Like I'm telling you, it's not about the national NBA media. It's the quality of play. There's a perception there. And it's not always the right perception, but it is the perception, and the NBA has to wrestle with that.
That's a lot. I think that before they change anything with regard to the style of play, they need to address all the controllables that are even more controllable than that. I think shortening games so that you don't literally lose audiences in the fourth quarter because you have 45 commercials and the last 2 minutes take 45 minutes.
Yep.
So
is that like reviews, like cutting down reviews,
cut the reviews,
challenges,
cut the timeouts? Like, it's just ridiculous. It's awful.
Make it more like soccer, but not really like soccer. But
more like soccer. And look,
smoother play.
I saw your tweet about this. MLB shortened the game. MLB has been a struggling sport for a long time, but these have had real gains, like in viewership, based on shortening the game, the rule changes. So that they made rule changes, in fairness, and maybe that's something the NBA needs to look at. But before we get there, I want to do that. I also think it's easy to criticize a style of play for people who are nostalgic for the 90s. But frankly, I think a lot of this has to do with just viewership habits, the changing landscape of media generally. There are like huge macro issues that go beyond like teams are shooting too many threes that I think have much more to do with ratings drops than the style of play. All that said, I am not opposed to experimenting with a different court geometry. We don't have to talk about all the details there, but like to try to lower the amount of threes. The problem basically is that I think no matter what you do, you're just changing the incentive. But I think as long as 3 = 3 and 2 = 2, you're going to get a lot of threes.
Well, the only rule change, you're right. And the only rule change that has been floated that is interesting.
Oh yeah, the cap.
The cap. Like then like it really brings like an element of strategy to the game that would be to me really fun. Like if you have like 43s to take in a game, whatever the number is, you have to keep a few in your back pocket for late game situations. Like you have to try to manage when you're taking them. It's
that's interesting.
But again, the experimenting part, like you have a G League and you really need to sort of like.
Oh, by the way, I didn't know the G League does this. I went to Westchester. They do for the first 3 quarters, I think, 1 free throw. And if you make it, it's 2 points. And if you miss, you get a point and then you just shoot 1. Brilliant. No reason that shouldn't be in the NBA. Fourth quarter, make 2 free throws. The vast majority of players make 1 out of 2. Give them the point and make them shoot 1. And let's move things along. Brilliant idea. That should be in the NBA by next year. To me, that's obvious one.
Yeah, I like that one.
But yeah, I love the game. I think the game's great, obviously. But to your point, I'm obviously invested in it. I think there's a lot of bad faith arguments against the style of play that's rooted in other things that I don't like. And I would also say, Bill Simmons had a whole long rant to start his last podcast. I think he was on the money in terms of like, there's always the NBA's falling apart narratives. It's been going on for 40 years. And then something happens, whether it's a player that comes along or an event that takes place that kind of reignites interest. I do think the fact that there's no American star, I wish it wasn't the case, but I think it is the case that it matters. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of different elements at play. I think style of play might be a smaller one than the discourse has suggested, but I'm not discounting it.
Yeah, the superstar part of it, because it is, it was like obviously Bird and Magic, and then Jordan,
Shaq and Kobe,
and then Shaq, Kobe. Then you had a gap, and then Steph,
LeBron.
So I think LeBron, Steph. Yeah. So you have had players come along. It just doesn't, and I'm sure there's going to be someone in the next 2 or 3 years. It just doesn't feel like right now that there's someone I can point to and like, all right, that in terms of American star, I get it. That's not awesome to have to think about that part of it, but like, it just doesn't feel like there's one ready to go. That this guy in like 2-3 years like is going to be like the face of the league. And
I don't think Cooper Flagg's that guy as good as I think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be like a transformative star.
Right. And then, but it also like are we at a point now with like everything's so bifurcated? Like, can you be a massive cultural icon in a sport anymore? Like the NFL doesn't need one. I know like players have sort of broken through, maybe for other reasons off the field, but like you don't need that signature star. And MLB is like, they haven't had one. I don't know when's the last like major, like giant like everyone in the world knows who this player is, even if you don't watch MLB. Like
I mean, if Shohei Ohtani is not that, he's something close, but yeah.
Okay.
I hear you.
Ohtani's probably your closest one, but again, it's just like no one is sitting down. Like you don't get like millions and millions of people like watching a sporting event anymore. So no one's watching the finals in that way. It's all you're so many different avenues. So it's just so hard to break through as a major American star that's almost like an unfair expectation.
Maybe it's something. And I also I think the NBA needs to do itself more favors marketing its game. I think it has gotten too star dependent and hasn't marketed teams well enough. I think they need to maybe think about how they're doing that in their approach. There are a lot of factors at play. And again, not discounting the style of play is not part of it. I just sometimes think that critique is rooted in other things. And I also think macro issues are a larger point. But anyway, to Kevin's point, go watch football if you don't like it. Well, people are going to watch football. That is definitely true. That sport gets bigger and bigger. All right, Kevin, we're going to close off after this, I think. But Kevin's got one more. 2 rule changes that, in my opinion, would improve quality. Only intentional kickballs, not thrown off, but that is the rule. It's just not called very well. And advantage play if foul occurs and chance to score. Yeah, I've thought about the advantage the way soccer does it. I wish that were the rule. I think
explain that one to me. I don't know what that is.
So in soccer, if you commit a foul, but the team continues on an advantage, they hold the whistle.
Oh,
and then if the advantage closes, then they blow it and you get a free kick.
Got it.
It's a good idea. I think the unintended consequence might be, well, now we have to review, like, was there an advantage? Because in soccer, they basically just said the referee has a lot of power. And even though VAR comes in on like goals for like offside and stuff, like that kind of thing, not so much. So it's, are we going to review another thing? Like, was it an advantage? Anyway, we don't have to get into the details, but it's an interesting idea, Kevin. I agree. Hypothetically, very interesting rule tweak. All right. Well, that is all. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We ask you to please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a 5-star rating wherever you are listening to this episode. I'm Ben Ritholtz. That's DJ Zullo. He's the best. Follow all of our content across all of our platforms. KFS is doing second to none work. If you haven't checked out Jeremy Cohen's Cap or No Cap, if you want to learn every possibility the Knicks could explore in the trade market, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is extraordinary work. Thanks, GMAC, for being on the ones and twos. Talk to everybody soon. Have a great night.
See ya.